Hi, welcome to Block 1, Constructing, Measuring, and Using Geometric Notation, Lesson 16. I'll share my screen. So, in your previous lesson, you learned how to interpret pie charts or simple pie charts using proportion. So, using proportional reasoning, you were able to interpret simple pie charts. In today's lesson, you're going to learn to interpret pie charts using a protractor. Now, something I want to give you a glimpse into that you'll be learning in this lesson is that number one, the total number of angles in a circle is 360 degrees. Hence, we're using a protractor to measure angles in a pie chart because sometimes not all pie charts are drawn to have equal parts. And if they are not of equal parts, then we're going to have to determine the angles that each of those parts represent. So I want you to have that information in mind as we learn in this lesson. Remember to like the video, share the video with those you think can benefit, subscribe to the channel, and click on the notification bell so that when new videos are released, you will be notified. By doing this, you help us grow our mission to educate the global population of children to have high quality maths education regardless of their economic situation. Thank you. Before we start, I would like you to pause the video and answer questions 1 and 2 in 3 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered questions 1 and 2, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. So for the first one, you were asked to work out 3/8 of 160. So 3/8 means you need to split the bar model into 8 equal parts and you need 3 lots of those parts. So remember, working out fraction of amount, you divide by the denominator, hence we've split the bar model into 8 equal parts and we multiply by the numerator. So we want 3 of those parts, of which you will get 60. Okay? Next, you are asked to simplify these fractions. So if you simplify these fractions, you would get 1/4, 1/3, 11/18, and 2/5. I want you to take note of what we've done here, where we're working out or finding out what fraction of particular quantities are out of 360. It's because the total number of angles in a circle is 360 degrees. Okay? All right. Some new learning for this lesson. Here you ask 240 people were asked about their favorite race season. Their responses are shown in the pie chart. Now, the question here, how many people chose autumn? What would you do? Well, here he says we can't work this out because a pie chart only shows us the proportion of people who chose each season. Is that true? Have a think. Well, we know that there are 240 people. Recall in our previous lesson that we said you can work out portions of the pie chart, the proportion of the pie chart, if you know the total number of people that the pie chart represents or the number of people that portions of the pie chart represents. We can use that information to answer questions. So we wouldn't agree with him. Here is why. But here is this one. Okay. Um, we can't work less than 1/4 of people chose autumn. Well, if we use a protractor, we can begin to measure the angles. Okay. So that is why in this lesson, we're going to be using a protractor. So you can see that we do not know the angles, but we can use a protractor to measure the angles. So notice that we want to measure the angle, and we can use a ruler to extend the line so that we can read from the protractor properly. So when we do that, we would have 45 degrees out of 360. Why? We have 360 as the total angle in a circle. So if we have what fraction, remember when we worked with pie chart in our previous lesson, if we know the proportion, which is represented by the fraction of that part of the pie chart, and we know the total number that the pie chart represents, we can answer lots of questions. So here we do 45 out of 360, which is 1/8. So 1/8 of 240 will give us the number of people who chose autumn, and that will be 30. Here is another example. A group of people were asked how many pets they have. The pie chart shows the pie chart shows the result. How many people have 2 pets? Well, the first thing we do is we can measure the angle for the number of people for the proportion of people that have 2 pets. So if we measure that, we would see that 2/5 of people have 2 pets. But here is what somebody have done. They then worked out 2/5 of 60, which is 24, and they said 24 people have 2 pets. Can you spot the mistake? Well, something I want to mention is the frequency is telling us the number of people. So, number of people who have 1 pet is 60. So we'll see where the mistake comes from, and then we'll learn from that mistake. Now, we know that the number of people that have 1 pet is 60. So let's find out the proportion. Remember, to work out proportion, we need to know the fraction that portion of the pie chart represents. Okay, so let's measure the angle. So we'll take a protractor and measure the angle for the number of pets, which is one pet. That will be 120 out of 60, 360. Okay. Now remember, the whole lot is always 360 for a pie chart. So that gives us 1/3. So 1/3 of people have 1 pet. That 1/3 of something we don't know is equal to 60. And did you remember what we do is when I explained this in the previous lesson, if you're working out 1/3 of an amount, we know that to work that out, you multiply with the numerator and we divide with the denominator. But in this case, we'll do an inverse operation. So we do not know the actual amounts we use to get this. So we're going to multiply by the denominator and divide by the numerator. If there was a number here, that's what we would do. So that should give us 180. Okay. So another way of thinking about it is 1/3 of something is 60. So if you were to use a bar model to represent this, so you split the bar model into 3 equal parts. A part of that is 60. So the whole lot, which is 3 parts, will be 180. So different ways to look at the same problem. So 180 people were asked in total. So now we can work out the number of people that have 2 pets. Because remember, initially, we knew that 2/5 of the people had 2 pets by measuring the angle and working out the fraction of that angle out of 360. So we just work out 2/5 of 180, which is 72. It's now time for you to use the information that you have learned, the knowledge you have gathered, to practice. So pause the video and answer question 1 in 3 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 1, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. So for question 1, you're asked, each student in a group studies one language. The pie chart shows the languages they studied. You can see the pie chart there. What is the most popular language? And you can see that represents a greater proportion of the pie chart, so it's Spanish. What is the least popular language? You can see it's German. That represents a smaller portion of the pie chart. Okay? Next, you will ask, Dora and Tommy are each writing the fraction of students that study French. Here, she says, I think it is a quarter, 1/4. And then here he says, I think it is 90/360. Who do you agree with? Of course, we agree with both. Remember, we can express proportion when we see this really easily. We can see this is a quarter of the circle. And we can also express proportion by working out in degrees. So we know this is 90 degrees. We do 90 divided by 360 to get the fraction, which represents the proportion. Yeah. And then a quarter, why? A quarter is equivalent to 90/360. Pause the video and answer question 2 in 2 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 2, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. So here you will ask, the pie chart shows the proportion of monkeys, which is represented by M, giraffes represented by G, and elephants represented by E in a zoo. You ask, what fraction of the animals are monkeys? You can see it's half of the whole circle, so it's half. Next, there are 180 monkeys, giraffes, and elephants in total. How many monkeys are there? You simply work out the proportion or the fraction of the whole. The whole is, yeah. So you just work out half of that, okay? So there are 180 monkeys, giraffes, and elephants in total. So you just do half of the whole, which is half of 180, which is 90. Okay, let's look at some further examples for this lesson. So 80 children were asked to choose their favorite sport from 6 options. And here we have it. So what this is showing is sometimes in a pie chart, you would see percentage written in the pie chart. That does not change how we view or visualize pie charts. It's just represented in a different way. So you watch how we do this. We're being asked how many children chose swimming. Well, 20% chose swimming. So we're going to have to find out 20% of 80. Okay, to find the number of children that chose swimming. So 20% of 80 is doing, remember, percentage is out of 100. So there are different ways to do this. So we can split this into 10 equal parts. Why? Splitting into 10 equal parts makes each part equal to 10%, which gives us 100%. So 20% is 2 lots of that, which will give you 16, because dividing 80 by 10 will give you 8. So 20% of that is 16. Another way to do this for some people is we know percent represents 100. So it's to do 20 out of 100 times 80. Okay? So this is another way of representing this information. Okay? All right. So somebody else, some people could work it like this. And remember, there was a time we did a percentage of amounts. So this one, we know 20% represents 1/5 of something. So to find out 20%, you simply divide by 5. So you could have done 80 divided by 5 to get the amount. Now, if we asked, work out the number of children who chose each sport, well, we can begin to use the information we know already to answer this question. So have a think and see what answer you come up with. Well, we can see that 8 did dance. How do we know? Because they each represent 10%. To find out 10% of anything, you divide that thing by 10. So 80 divided by 10 is 8. To find 30%, you can find 10% and you multiply by 3. So 8 times 3 is 24. To find 5%, you can find 10% and then halve it. So we know 10% is 8, so half of 10% is 5. 5%, which is equal to 4. So half of 8 is 4. We can work out 25%. We know that to work out 25% of any amount, we divide that amount by 4. So 80 divided by 4 is 20. It's now time for you to pause the video and do some practice. So pause the video and answer question 3 in 3 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 3, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. So here you were asked, the pie chart shows the favorite subjects of the students in a class. Aisha says more students like maths than like English. Is she correct? Of course, yes, because you can see that this represents a greater proportion. If we were to do 140 divided by 360, that will represent a greater fraction or proportion compared to this. Next, you ask to explain your answer. We just explained it. Next, you ask, is this statement true or false? Give reasons for your answer. So more students like maths than the other subjects. Okay, of course, no. All right, so when you compare this proportion compared to the others, this is 90, add 110 is already greater than 140. Okay. Next, what fraction of students prefer each subject? Give your answers in their simplest form. So to do this, you work out the fraction out of 360. So that will give you the proportion. So science would be 90 out of 360, which will be a quarter. So how we got these? So I'll write it beside 90 degrees out of 360 degrees. This one is 140, and you can check this later using your calculator. That's how we got these, the fractions. For English, it is 110 degrees divided by 360 degrees. And then to know what is left of this, you simply add 140 to 110 plus 90. You subtract it from 360, okay, to work this out. Okay, whatever you get, you then do that number out of 360. Then here you ask, there are 36 students in the class. How many students said science was their favorite subject? So you already know science is 1 over 14. 1 over 4. So you do 1 over 4 of the total number of students, 36, which is 9. Okay. Pause the video and answer question 4 in 2 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 4, here are the answers. So here you ask, the pie chart shows the favorite food of 120 people. the pie chart is drawn accurately. So if it's drawn accurately, you can fill in the frequency table. Say, fill in the frequency table to show how many people chose each food. So the first thing you're going to do is to use a protractor to measure the angles. So imagine you have taken a screenshot of this and you've printed it out, or you have the workbook from White Rose Maths. You measure the angles, then you work out the angles out of 360 to give you the fraction that each of these parts represent, and you simply use the fraction to multiply 120. Okay, and that's how you get each of these. Pause the video and answer question 5 in 2 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 5, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. For question 5, you were asked, a group of 500 people were asked how many pets they had. The pie chart shows the results. You can see the result here. How many more people had 3 or more pets than had 1 pet? So the percentage is given to you. So you can work out there are different methods to do this. Some people will use a protractor to measure this, but we can just use the percentages to work this out. So we're being asked how many more people had 3 or more pets than 1 pet. Okay, so let's find out the number of people that had 1 pet. So we can do 25% of 500. So to do 25% is to divide by 4. So 25%. So to divide by 4 means to halve and to halve again. So half of 500 is 250. Another half of 250 is 125. Okay. Next, let's look at those that have 3 pets and more. So we know that we have 10% plus 25%, which is 35%. 35% plus another 30% is 65%. So 100% minus 65%, which is 35%, represents those that have 3 pets or more. Okay? So let's work out 35%. So 35% of 500, 35% of 500. So we can find 10%. 10% is to divide by 10. So 10% is 50. Okay. So 10% is 50. Now, you may be wondering why this 10%, so 50 represents 10%. You may be wondering why this 10% is important. We don't even need to work out the total number. We don't need to complete this calculation, because if you look at this compared to that, you can see that this is 10% more than that. And we already know what 10% of 500 is. So if this is 10% more than that, we can just say that it is 50. And you can see the answer there. Pause the video and answer question 6 in 2 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 6, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. So here you were asked, 2 groups of people were asked to choose their favorite sport. So you have group A and group B. What do you notice about the proportions of people who chose each sport in each group? Well, what we notice is the proportions are actually represented by the same portions, okay? The proportions are the same. Now, there are 540 people in group A. There were 3 times as many people in group B. So when you're answering questions like this, you can start to take steps to do the initial preparation of the numbers that you need for your calculation. So if there are 540 people in group A and there are 3 times as many people in group B, how many people in group B said that tennis was their favorite sport? So first step, you can do 540 times 3 to get the number of people in group B, because group B is 3 times more than group A. So that's 0. 3 times 0 is 0. 3 times 4 is 12. We write 2, we carry 1. 3 times 5 is 15, plus the 1 we carried is 16. So we have 1,620 people in group B. Now we ask how many people in group B said that tennis was their favorite sport. So we can see from the key that tennis, to find the number of people that are represented by tennis, we can measure the angle there. Well, we don't really need to measure because we know everything adds up to 360. So step 1, we can do 170 add 30, which is 200, plus 90, which is 290. So altogether, the other part is represented by 290 degrees. Next, to find out what this tennis represents, we can do 360 degrees minus 290 degrees. That should be 0. We cannot subtract that from that, so we borrow from there. So that's 16 in terms of the place value. So 16 minus 9 is 7. So it means the portion that we need, the proportion of tennis, will be 70 degrees out of 360. All right. Now, we do this and we multiply that by 1,620. Okay, we use our calculator to work this out. So let's just do that real quick. So we do 70 we do 1620 divided by 36, then times 7, which will give us 315. Okay, so this is the approach you'd use, and then that will lead you to your answer right here. Okay, pause the video and answer question 7 in 2 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 7, here are the answers. So here you ask, the pie chart shows how Mr. Hall spends his money in a month. He saves £387.50. How much money does he spend on rent? So first thing, we're going to find out to say, well, his savings, what portion does his savings represent in degrees? So we know that the total number of degrees of everything we have here is, we're going to work that out by adding them up. So we're going to do 79, add 70, add 48, add 70, add 48, add 101, and then we'll subtract. The total is 298, so we'll do 360 to get the degrees that the savings represent, the number of the angle that represents, we'll do 360 degrees minus 298 degrees. Okay, so here we can borrow from there. That's a 5. So 10 minus 8 is 2. If we borrow from here, that's 15. 15 minus 9, that should be 6. So 62 degrees is this portion here. Now, we're told that this is the amount he saves. So 62 degrees, let's find out what fraction that represents out of 360, because if we know the proportion, then it will be easy to start to work things out. So we do 62 divided by 360. That represents 31 over 180. Okay, 31 over 180. So 31 over 180 degrees. Okay, now this portion here of x, something the total amount we don't know, is equal to this amount which he saves, 387 pound 50. Now remember what I told you, that if we were working out the fraction of an amount, we'll divide by the denominator and multiply by the numerator. But in this case, we'll have to do the inverse operation because we don't know the amount. So we'll multiply 387.5 by 180, and we divide by 31. That gives us a total amount. So the whole money that is available as 2,250. Now we're being asked how much money he spends on rent. Now rent is 101 degrees. So we're going to do 101 degrees out of 360 of this amount. Okay. Now to do that, you simply do this amount, 101 times 2,250 divided by 360. And you would see that you will get £631 25 pence, which is this amount here. Okay, so you can see how we use one information and then using our knowledge of proportion, doing reverse operation to get the answer. And that brings us to the end of our lesson. So well done for sticking around for learning how to interpret pie charts using a protractor. Until next time, take really good care of yourself, and bye-bye.